Yeah,
All
I'm
right,
going to start letting the attendees in. Oh, here come a few people.
Oh, I forgot one thing. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon.
Laurel?
We're going to need a couple of minutes for everyone to get settled and get the Facebook live streaming set up. So everybody just hold on in the audience. Lots of people.
Was Laurel Thatcher Ulrich.
Oh, you looked it up?
We knew it was a woman.
Yeah.
Huh.
Thank you, Kathy. For everybody who's on already waiting for us to get started, we have just identified a very important quote.
Say again, who did it? Who say the
What
quote
was the
again?
quote first?
Harvard professor Laurel Thatcher Ulrich.
Uh-huh.
So well-behaved women never make history or rarely make history.
Rarely make history.
Okay, so we're assuming that we have some not so well-behaved women on our call today, all ready to make some history. All of us. Okay.
Give me a second and I will. Ladies,
We need a screenshot of this. Does this work?
Oh yeah, I should take a picture too.
I'm going to take. So nice to see you all from Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Here,
Does everybody have their morning coffee ready?
I have my appropriate mug.
Great. Oh, and I have
there you go.
I have my favorite mug.
Okay,
Oh,
hold
I
on.
like that.
And get yours up there again. I'm taking
Okay,
a
guys,
screenshot of that.
it's time. So everybody, oh, you're all ready. All right, we're going live, everybody.
All
Okay.
right. Okay.
All right.
Angela,
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining Democrats Abroad Arizona Women to Win webinar today. We'll get started, and just a second. Yes, we are definitely live on Facebook. I heard the ding. And if you want to take it away.
welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ann Hesse, and I'm the chair of the Democrats Abroad Global Women's Caucus. And I'm joined by Angela Fobbs today, DA Global Black Caucus Chair. And to help us put that spotlight on Arizona, we have DNC member Katie Solon. Katie is a former DA Global Chair and has been very active this summer, helping to get out the vote in her voting state, Arizona. And today, we're going to hear from some very special guests, 4 candidates running for the Arizona State Senate and House, as well as one of the leaders of the ERA Task Force Arizona. Before we get started, please note that we've gathered questions that attendees have sent in, and we'll be asking these questions on the call today. If you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Then, directly after this event, you can move to our special voter assistance Zoom meeting. Volunteers from our voter assistance team will be standing by live to help answer your voting questions after this call. The link will be in the chat box. If you have questions on registering to vote, requesting your absentee ballot, or the best way to return that voted ballot, you can click on over to that link in the chat box after the call. But now I'd like to hand off to Katie, who will introduce our wonderful guests. Take it away, Katie.
Thanks, Ann. I am delighted to welcome our guests from Arizona. Felicia French is running for the Arizona State Senate. Judy Schriepert, Kathy Knecht, and Sharon Gerard are all running for the State House. And Diane Post is, as Ann said, a leading ERA and women's rights activist in Arizona. The candidates are all supported by the ERA Task Force Arizona and/or now the National Organization of Women. They all did very, very well in the Arizona primary on August 4th. When they win, we can flip the Arizona State Legislature and then do all kinds of good things, including ratifying the ERA, increasing funding for education, and, well, I'm going to let you hear from the guests instead of me. We now invite each of the candidates to tell us why they're running, what issues are most critical to their campaigns, and what their priorities would or will be once they get elected. And after the opening statements of the candidates, we'll go to questions and then to Diane about the ERA task force. So we'll get started with Felicia French, decorated U.S. Army Colonel, medevac pilot, and hospice nurse. Welcome, Felicia. Would you please start and tell us about you, your district, and your motivating issues?
Katie, thank you for that. And Angela, Ann, for hosting this candidate forum. I really appreciate this. This is really exciting to be sort of in Germany again. I was there for 3 years. I think I mentioned that earlier to some of you. I'm delighted to be here with you as well as Diane and my sister candidates, Kathy, Judy, and Sharon. I believe Mayor Kroll Evans is not available right now. But I'm delighted to be running with her, and I will be happy to talk about her a little later if she can't make it. First, hi, I'm Felicia French. I'm a third-generation Arizonan, and I'm running for state senate in Arizona's Legislative District 6. I'm a nurse, a 32-year U.S. Army and National Guard veteran, and a proud single mom. Like you and your members, I've spent several years abroad in such places as Germany, Honduras, and Afghanistan. And like you, I always made it a point to vote, even when I was away from home. I joined the Army when I was 17 and rose through the ranks from private to colonel. I've been a medevac helicopter pilot, an equal opportunity employment officer, and a senior medical advisor. As a civilian, I've been an educator, an entrepreneur, and a sustainability scientist. I volunteered with groups like AmeriCares and the Sierra Club, as well as my own local community groups in Pine. Where I've been at home here, this is my home here in Pine for 19 years. I've been thinking globally and acting locally, and that's why I want to make sure that we make Arizona better, not only for today's family, but for future generations.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Felicia. Judy Schriepert, 27 years a teacher, theater co-founder. Would you please go next?
Yes, thank you so much, Katie, and all of you for having us. And thank you to, as Felicia said, my sister candidates. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I love travel, and I have been everywhere from Guatemala to Israel and Palestine, and traveled from Ireland to Istanbul. So at the same time, this has always been home. My family came to Arizona in 1958, and my dad supported our family of 5 as a shop teacher at one of the local high schools. And my parents, my mom and dad, both taught me the importance of perseverance and hard work and education. And so I became a teacher as well, as Katie mentioned, and I spent 27 years teaching at Greenway and Cactus High School, schools in the district. This is where I raised my 2 sons. This is where I was a co-founder of Theater Works many years ago, and it's still thriving and flourishing. And this district is the place where I really learned that we all do better when we're listening and working together to get things done so that everybody gets their chance to thrive. And that's the attitude and philosophy that I am bringing to this race and to the Arizona legislature. You know, I never imagined that I would be running for office, but last year we had children here in Arizona in over 1,800 classrooms who had no permanent qualified teacher. And that breaks my heart, and it is a disaster for our children and our families as well as for our economy. So I thought somebody has to do something about that. And it turned out that all of us here today are the ones who are going to do something about that. So I've been listening to the people of our district for years, and the people who are in the legislature are not listening. So what we are hearing is that people want great schools. They want to make sure that nobody has to go bankrupt because they get sick. And they want to make sure we're rebuilding a strong economy safely and by supporting our local businesses. So I am really proud to be among this, this group of powerful women. And thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all that you've already done and are going to do. Education is a topic in Arizona. It has to be. So our next guest, Kathy, also a teacher for a long time, a school board member, president of the Arizona School Board Association. Would you please go next?
I will. Thank you so much for having me and my colleagues here today. It's great to talk to people around the world. It's kind of mind-boggling to think about that. And not many people would know that my name is really Kinesh. Am I saying it right? And when you're a servant leader, it's a really cool name to have, right? Kinesh means servant. I am Kathy Connect, and I'm running for the Arizona House of Representatives. And I am in LD21, which, if you know, Maricopa County is in the northwest part of the valley, where Sun City and Surprise and Peoria are. And I was raised here, went to public schools here, taught school here in the West Valley. And I was the president of the Arizona School Boards Association. That gave me an opportunity to see every corner of the state, see the disparities therein, see the challenges that people have in schools, in workforce development, in water conservation, you name it. I've seen so much of this state. That's been a wonderful experience for me. I ran a local, regional nonprofit corporation in leadership development here in the West Valley that also afforded me the opportunity to learn about the multiple issues that are facing our communities and meet a wide variety of experienced experts in those fields. And so when an issue is facing our community, I know who to go to talk to find solutions that are common ground for a lot of people. I have dedicated my life to public service. I've served on dozens of nonprofit boards here in the Northwest Valley on domestic violence and workforce development and supporting schools and teachers, senior care and transportation issues, and a whole bunch of other things. I was an honorary commander at Luke Air Force Base back in 2010, and I stayed involved with Fighter Country Partnership as a volunteer. So I'm very engaged with our local Air Force Base, and supporting the men and the women out there at Luke is really something I enjoy doing. I've always been a very independent thinker. I actually ran as an independent back in 2018 and had a very successful campaign, just fell a little bit short. I'm a very pragmatic, bipartisan leader, and I'm focused on strengthening our schools. As Judy mentioned, it's so important here. I want to work to get affordable, quality healthcare accessible to everyone. We have lots of seniors and families here in the Northwest Valley. And I want to bring higher paying jobs to Arizona as a whole and my Northwest Valley in particular.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. And welcome to Sharon Gerard. Sharon, a physician's assistant and reproductive rights activist. The mic is all yours, Sharon.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Gerard, and I'm running for the House, and I spent all of my career, 30 years as a physician assistant. And many of you in Europe and in different places around the world have the PA profession, and it actually brought me to England. There was a pilot project bringing the physician assistant profession to England, and I was part of that pilot project and lived in England for a year. So I know what it feels like to be an expat and all the excitement. We used to meet at the pub once a week, and that was really wonderful. Anyway, so I am not a born and raised Arizonan. I'm originally from the Jersey Shore, think Bruce Springsteen area there, and spent most of my life in California. But when we retired, like a good portion of people around the country, we looked to Arizona because my husband's family lives in New Mexico and my family lives in California, and this was a perfect spot. We came here over 5 years ago, and I have always wanted to make wherever I live and work a better place. And that's why I'm very, very committed to working. Now that I'm not working anymore in healthcare, I'm committed to make this state the best state for families and the future. So we're working for women's equality. I practiced a lot in women's healthcare. I've been very dedicated for women's reproductive rights, women's healthcare, in all spots. In fact, I started out wanting to be a midwife. So thank you very much for having us today. And I'm Sharon Gerard. I look forward to speaking more.
Well, thank you all. And just to let everybody who's not in Arizona know, it is just come on 7 a.m. for those of us that are in Arizona. So you're real troopers for getting up so early. It seems like we could have grabbed you for Democrats Abroad in the UK and Germany, Felicia and Sharon, but as of now, you are all honorary Democrats Abroad members. We're going to go to questions for the candidates now. You can see from this group of fantastic women that are with us this morning what our good chances are to flip the legislature with candidates like this. We'll take questions first that have come in from attendees that were sent to us ahead of time, and then we're going to take questions from the chat box. So if you have a question, put it in the chat box now, and Angela will be collecting that. And Anne, I guess you're going to start with our questions, right?
Let me just interrupt for 1 second.
Angela, go ahead. Yeah.
Put your questions in the Q&A box, and if you're on Facebook Live, you can just write your questions in the comments, please. Thanks.
Okay, good. Well, I'd like to start with a question for Felicia, if I may, and it's about COVID. The COVID-19 virus has hit the Native American communities particularly hard. At one point, infections per capita in the Navajo Nation were the highest in the US. During the pandemic, you have volunteered to work with local healthcare providers in the Navajo Nation. So why are Native American communities so vulnerable? And what more could the state of Arizona have done to help? And what will a Democratic Arizona legislature do differently?
Anne, thanks for that question. That's a really good one because so many people ask me why were the Navajo and the Hopi hit so hard compared to other indigenous groups, let alone the rest of the country and state. The reason for that goes back generations. They were hit so hard because there's been uranium mining on the Navajo Nation for decades, coal mining for decades, coal plants. There were 5 coal plants on or near the Navajo Nation since the 1960s and 70s. And so all those emissions contribute to asthma, emphysema, lung cancer. So, and COVID-19 is a respiratory disease, so it attacks the lungs. So when you already have lungs that are compromised because of those pollutants in their lungs. In addition to the uranium mining is a legacy from the Cold War, which and now there's over 500 uranium mines still left on the Navajo Nation that they're just trying to clean up. So that causes cancer and lung disease as well, and it pollutes their water, pollutes their air. So all those things are contributing factors to the morbidity and mortality rate being higher on the Navajo and Hopi Nation. And so what we could have done before is not have done those things, preventative medicine, clean those sites up. It's wrong that we had them in the first place. We should have cleaned them up. They're way behind in the cleanup. But unfortunately, most of the mines, uranium and coal, they leave, they're subcontracted, they leave, and then the taxpayers are burdened with cleaning them up, and then the Navajo and the Hopi are left with the diseases and carrying on. In addition to the air issues, when you have that uranium coal mining, they strip the land, so now it's denuded, so you can't really grow crops on it. So you contribute to they have to eat a lot of processed food instead of healthy food that they can grow themselves. And there's only a dozen or so grocery stores in an area the size of, I believe, West Virginia. So, and you have to drive miles and miles to get there, and they jack the prices up there. So they eat a lot of processed food, which contributes to diabetes. So now that's a contributing factor for morbidity, mortality for any disease, let alone especially COVID-19. So those are some of the things that are why, and what we need to do is clean up those sites and start letting the tribal nations be sovereign. We haven't let them dictate their own sovereignty. And thank goodness the president there, Jonathan Nez, is wonderful. He mandated public mask wearing beforehand and did lockdowns and curfews. So now it's in control. And so we should be following his example as leadership in that respect. So I hope that answered all that question. I think it was a 3-part question, though.
Oh, yes. There's a lot to do, it sounds like. My goodness, what a lot of work.
Thank you. The next question is for Judy. Judy, 27 years in the classroom. Bravo, you. Education is such a critical, glaring issue in Arizona. It has ranked 49th in the United States in education spending. I don't know where it is right now, but it is the bottom 5 of all of the states, isn't it? Why do you think schools have been so defunded over the last couple of decades? Who are the culprits? Where has the money gone? And why is the ever increasing privatization of our schools a problem, especially in Arizona?
Thank you so much. Those are great questions, Katie. So a little bit of tax policy background. Here in Arizona, we have had governors, well, particularly more recently with Governor Ducey, and also Governor Jan Brewer before him, who want to make sure that they keep taxes as low as possible. So they have shifted Arizona's revenue source mainly to sales tax, which we know is a regressive tax that penalizes lower income people more than higher income. But anyway, so in 2008, when we hit that first recession, we know that people stopped buying things during a recession. And so our revenue went way down. And so extreme measures were needed. And Arizona legislatures chose to make draconian cuts in our education system. Arizona cut more from education than any other state in the US. So we have never really recovered from that. So we've been trying to make some strides in recent years, but we're still at 49th in the nation because, of course, all the other states are continuing to invest more fully. At the same time, Arizona has been hit by this nationwide movement to privatize education. And we've really been the petri dish for that, where the Betsy DeVosses of the world have said, oh, and the Alex of the world have said, let's try it in Arizona. So we've been, unfortunately, the leader in the nation in privatizing education. So we're at the point now where over $200 million every year gets diverted from the Arizona revenue bucket to go directly into what's known as STOs, really vouchers, and other voucher programs. So that really, contributes to the problem of being able to have enough resources to invest in our schools. And that's what's led to this terrible teacher shortage. It's really in a crisis at this point, to the point where our governor over the last couple of years has just said, okay, anybody can get an emergency certificate. You don't have to know anything about teaching. We'll just get some breathing adult into the classroom. So we've had, like I said earlier, over 1,800 classrooms who had no permanent certified teacher last year. And we have enough teachers in Arizona to teach, but they're doing other things because they can't afford to support their families on a teaching salary. So I hope that answers your question. There's so much more to say, but that's the gist of it.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up, but I can't. It goes now to Anne, but I think we're staying in that topic.
We're still on education here. So Kathy, you were also a teacher for many years. You served in the Peoria School Board and also as the president of the Arizona School Boards Association. So parents, kids, teachers, employers, they all want children back in school in person and as soon as possible. So how should Arizona be handling this? How is Arizona handling this? Where is this working and where is it not? Is it, and to follow on with the school funding discussion, has Invest in Ed fought its way to the ballot in November? What is it exactly, and will it pass? And what will that mean for Arizona public education?
Let's start with Invest in Ed. That's Proposition 208. And like so many other areas of legislation in Arizona, actually the state legislature did not tackle how to do funding in Arizona. Despite given multiple opportunities and bipartisan proposals to raise revenue for schools, they've shirked their responsibility. And in response, in 2018 and now again in the 2020 election, we've had literally hordes of mothers and fathers and teachers and education advocates hit the streets, knocking on doors in sometimes 105, 110 degree weather to gather tens of thousands of signatures. And so it will be on the ballot after some very dramatic court cases, once booting them off the ballot and then the Arizona Supreme Court saying that it can stay on the ballot. And so, yeah, Arizonans will have an opportunity to decide whether or not to impose a 35%, if my colleagues will help me if I get this wrong, 35% surcharge on incomes for individuals over $250,000 or households over $500,000, only on the taxable income above that. And so, yeah, the good news is Arizona is this wonderful state where the voters do have the opportunity to make their own legislations when the legislature lets them down yet again. And so this would be a revenue stream that Arizona needs very, very much, as Judy so well illustrated. And it'll be a substantial amount of money that'll finally start digging us out of this hole, this $4.5 billion cut hole that the legislature has put on our schools and our kids over the last 10 years. My experience is in school boards, and as you know, that is the most local form of elected government there is. So I'm a huge champion of local control, despite the fact that the legislature always tries to put their thumbs on school boards and municipalities here in Arizona. I do believe that the government closest to the people is the best. Some other things we know is that we know that kids learn better in classrooms with teachers. We know, because we're calling people every day, education in general is top of mind of Arizonans, and getting our kids back in school is such a big concern for people. It's really hard for teachers to teach online, and it's really hard for parents who are stuck home with those kids to help be those support educators. They're not trained for that, and it's a real burden. And we know that. So everybody's suffering through pandemic across the world. The COVID numbers in Arizona were the worst in the nation about a month ago. I'm sure everybody was aware of that. But the numbers are declining right now, and we're very pleased to see that. But until we can see those numbers continue to go down to a point where we really believe we're safe, the fear of losing the progress that we've made is really legitimate. We have to keep in mind that kids don't live at school. They go home from school. And if there happens to be an outbreak in a school, like Arizona State University right now is having a horrible outbreak. Despite the school trying to keep it on the hush hush, we know that there are kids and teachers, and those numbers are rising at ASU. But if kids get sick at school, they take it home, they take it back into our local businesses, they take it to the grocery store, and we run the risk of having those numbers climbing up again. Our superintendent of public instruction here in Arizona offered schools really solid benchmarks. And then finally, the governor and the Arizona Department of Health put out some metrics that schools can use, and they are using them. I'm going to point out that one of the women that I am opposing right now is on my local school board now. And she, despite our school district saying to wait until later, until like the end of September or beyond, she said, no, let's open up on September 8th. And I said, many said, September 8th, that seems kind of strange because it is the day after a 3-day weekend. And again, if you've been watching the numbers in Arizona, we don't do so well with 3-day weekends. After Memorial Day and after the 4th of July, the numbers in Arizona skyrocketed. Since then, finally, the governor has started saying that people need to wear masks. People have been behaving better. The numbers have been coming down. But we need to see if Arizonans can keep their masks on through this next 3-day weekend. I think September 8th is the wrong day to say, let's try again. We need to see if those numbers spike after that. Because a worst case scenario is that we prolong this and keep ourselves locked down and keep things tough. Listen, if I get into the legislature, and I'm fully expecting to do so, education funding needs to be our first priority. And I would do a special bill specifically for COVID relief for schools so we can protect the kids and the teachers in schools and keep it from spiking again. We need to fund schools for PPE. We need to have air filtration systems. We're learning that that's so important. Disinfectants, materials for helping schools do distancing. If we can keep our schools safe, we're going to keep our broader community safe. There's a lot of work to do, and I'm up and ready for it.
Thank you, Kathy. Sharon, let's keep talking about healthcare or the health area. You've worked for many years in all areas of healthcare, with the uninsured, with the underinsured in Arizona and other states. What should Arizona and the U.S. do to make sure that all in this state and in our country have access to affordable, quality health care? And an add-on, Arizona has been rated a D- when it comes to accessing the right to choose. Once you're elected, how will you help on both of these counts, on health care and on abortion rights?
So all of you who are living in foreign countries, you kind of take your health care for granted, right? I remember when I practiced in England and my patients sat across from me and I told them about what's it like in the US and their mouths just dropped. They can't understand that the richest country on earth doesn't have health care for all. And so that's what I want to do, is to fight in Arizona, because healthcare is a human right. My opponents have consistently fought for crazy things like pre-existing conditions, not covering that. And I don't believe in pre-existing conditions. I believe it's called a health history, and everyone has it. We've all had things happen to us, and it follows us through our lives, and it shouldn't count against us. We need to expand healthcare in Arizona. We have a wonderful award-winning public option called Access, which is our Medicaid program. We have been trying, from what I understand, to get a bill through that would allow people to buy in, those who fall through the cracks and aren't poor enough to get the Access program, to maybe buy in on a sliding scale so they have coverage. Let's get that done. That would be a priority for me. And dental care, we had to fight, and I was there at the State House this year, trying to get dental care for pregnant women. Now I know in England, dental care wasn't covered, and I went to the dentist there, but it wasn't extraordinarily expensive either. So it's harder here for people. Let's put dental care into healthcare, because we know it increases the risk of women having premature deliveries. It hurts and harms people all over. The other thing is we're seeing a rise in morbidity and mortality in women of color when they're pregnant in the state of Arizona, ever since our Republican governors have taken over. What's about that? And that needed to be addressed, and they tried to address it in the legislature last year, but it never went anywhere. We need to protect these women, and we need to look at what's going on, because if you are a woman of color, you have a higher rate of having problems or dying in pregnancy or right after. So there are a lot of things that we can do. One of the first things we can do when we get in, all of us, is pass the Equal Rights Amendment. let's get that done. Let's get it done on the first day, vote for the ERA, and then go on to the really bad and the hard and the important stuff. And don't get me wrong, ERA is really important, but it's something we can get done on a vote. So we need to send a message, and we need to send a message that women are equal, and that I want to work for equal pay for women. My opponents voted for a bill that would say, if you didn't have a high school diploma, you got to make less than the regular minimum wage. Oh yeah, so people without a high school diploma who are trying, or just a high school diploma who are trying to support their families for whatever reason, get to make less. So there's a lot of things to work on. Did I talk too long?
No, you didn't. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you for bringing in the ERA. I want everyone just to take a moment and imagine the Arizona legislature blue and these women serving in it. Oh, it's pretty exciting. And with this, I have the pleasure of introducing our other guest, Diane Post, who is on the steering committee of ERA Task Force Arizona. Diane is an attorney with 40 years experience, 18 in representing battered women and molested children in family law cases, and then 15 more in international human rights, focusing on gender-based violence. She is widely published and serves as treasurer of the Central Phoenix Inez Casiano National Organization of Women chapter. And Diane, we wanted to ask you to share with us what's going on with the ERA in Arizona and across the US. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your support personally and your organization's support of the candidates that we just listened to. Hi, Diane.
Hi. Well, thank you very much for asking me to be on this. I've heard all of these women speak before, but every time I hear them, I learn something new. So it's always good. And as you said, I worked abroad for 15 years. I lived in 6 different countries, worked in 14 different countries, and I voted every single time. I don't know if I was a member of Democrats Abroad or not, but I voted every single time. I never missed a vote. So for the ERA, Arizona's never ratified it. We've tried year after year after year, and it hasn't happened. Nationally, where we are is Virginia ratified it on January 20th, 2020, making it the 38th state, which is what's necessary under the Constitution for it to be put into the Constitution. Of course, the government said no, that it wasn't valid because of the timeline and because of rescissions. So there are 2 lawsuits going on right now regarding the certified 28th Amendment. We say it's done. It's done. It's the 28th Amendment. So, but of course, some people disagree with this. That's what lawyers do. We argue. So the case in Massachusetts was brought by the Equal Means Equal group. And the first round of that, it was dismissed based on standing. Standing is a concept of, does this person have the right to bring this suit? And they said, no, you don't, because you're not a state and because of this reason and that reason. So they said they didn't have standing, so they dismissed the suit on that. Not on anything substantive and not on any issue related to the ERA. Now, EME says they're going to appeal, and maybe they haven't yet, but maybe they are, and then that process will go forth to the appeals court and perhaps eventually the Supreme Court. The second lawsuit that's going on was brought by the 3 attorneys general of the last 3 states that ratified the ERA. So that was Nevada in 2017, Illinois in 2018, and Virginia in 2020. So those 3 attorney generals of those 3 states have joined together and filed a lawsuit in Washington, D.C., telling the National Archivist, who is the person who puts the ERA into the Constitution, telling him, do it. Do your job, put it in there. So many hundreds, literally, of groups have joined together with 5 or 6, well, I think there's maybe 8 now, amicus briefs, friend of the court briefs that have been filed. And of course, there are opponents, and a few of them, I think 2 or 3 different opponent amicus briefs have been filed. So now everything is in that lawsuit. It started out only to be about the timeline, and they were only going to argue about the 7-year timeline. And then there would have been another suit later about the rescission. But The states that have rescinded, and there are 5 states that have rescinded their ERA or attempted to rescind, you really can't, but that's the point. They have attempted to rescind their ratifications. They have now joined the lawsuit and said, you know, you don't have 38 because we've pulled out. So now all of the issues are in the bucket. So now the attorneys general have responded on the rescission issue as well, and have then filed what we call a summary judgment motion to say, okay, you don't need, all of this is to be decided on the law. You don't need to have a trial. You don't need to have discovery. This is all a legal question. So it can be decided by the judge. So they've asked for summary judgment on all the issues, the timeline issue and the rescission issue. On the timeline issue, the House, in Congress, the House has passed a bill in February, HJ Res 79, to get rid of the timeline. It needs to be passed in the Senate, where it's SJ Res 6. It probably won't be under this particular Senate. So it has 48 co-sponsors, but it's still unlikely to be heard because of McConnell. So when the Senate or the Congress goes back into session in January again, both bills will have to be introduced again and passed. So again, we're hoping nationally we turn blue, and then we can turn the Senate blue as well as the House, and then we can pass that, and that will then throw out the timeline issue, because if Congress throws it out, there is no timeline. So that's one. There's the legal method through the court, and then there's the method through Congress. On the rescission issue, there have been there have been a few attempts to withdraw their ratifications once they've done it regarding the 13th, 14th, and 15th. What a surprise. Amendment. Oh, and the 19th, women's right to vote, the end of slavery, equal protection, and Black men being able to vote. Of course, after states ratified that, then they tried to take back their ratification. Never has worked. The Supreme Court has said, nope, can't do it. So we're sure we're going to win that argument as well. So that's where we are, and that's where we're waiting. Now, there's nothing to do nationally but wait on the legal process to go through, try to get the Senate to pass SJ Res 6, which we are working on, and we've sent out 18,000 postcards in Arizona to McSally to try to get her to vote in favor of this, which has not worked. So that's what the action that's going on in Arizona. We're just working on keeping the ERA in the news, in the mind, in the public sphere, that this is an issue and that we're not giving up till this is done. So when we turn the legislature blue, as Sharon says, first day, let's get it done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Diane. So it's important for Arizona to keep going and ratify. In case these others do drop out, then we're going to need some more states, and we are still fighting in Arizona. Can you tell us, are 100% of the Democrats in the Arizona legislature now, and the ones that we know are coming in, are 100% of them supporting the ERA? And are there some Republicans on board as well in Arizona?
100% of the Democrats are supporting it in the past, in the past 4 years we've been working on it. Some more vigorously than others, let's put it that way, but it has been 100%. Of those going in, yes, every single one of them is a supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment. Of the Republicans, we have had 2 Republicans, Michelle Ugenti-Rita and Heather Carter, both of whom introduced it in the House and then in the Senate. Heather Carter's now gone. She was beaten in her primary. And then we had a male from Mesa who signed on to it and then withdrew his name. And then we had another Senator, Kate Brophy-McGee, who signed on. And then another House member, John Fillmore, who signed on. However, none of them voted for it when the time came to actually vote for it. They did put their name on the bill to introduce it, but then would not stand up for it when it was time to vote either for a discharge petition or to hear the bill or to override the rules so that it could be heard, since it was never heard in committee. None of them voted for that. So they put their name on it, but they never stood up.
Okay, so they had their chance and they didn't take it. So too bad. Kathy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I love when Diane talks about this issue. It's fascinating. I wonder if she would talk about why the Republicans say that we shouldn't pass the ERA. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want me to go there now, Katie?
I do, because I want to say that the question I just asked you came from Sherry Temple, who is the Democrats Abroad ERA team lead. And Diane, you've been in contact with her in the past. And she had one other question, and Kathy, you just said it. It was, what are the arguments against and what are the counter arguments? So thank you very much. Please, Diane, go ahead.
Well, the number one argument that they use is abortion, 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 and abortion. Because that's their emotional lead that they can get their followers to follow, which is to claim that it will be wide open abortion, that it will mean you can have an abortion, you know, the day before you give birth. And this is the kind of stuff they're actually saying. And Kathy Herod just had an op-ed in the newspaper here, and I just answered her yesterday. She's still claiming that same thing, even though we got a pro-choice Republican male legislator who wrote an op-ed in answer to her and said, this is nonsense. It's absolutely not true. She's an attorney too. Well, you know, that's their lead in. So of course they're going to use it, and that's their big argument. Their second argument, which will not surprise anybody here, is bathrooms, 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 bathrooms. Trans people might go into my bathroom. And I said to this one woman one time, trans people have already been in your bathroom. You just didn't notice. And one time when I was picketed speaking I was in Holbrook, was picketed, and this woman said, well, if we pass the ERA, men could go into women's bathrooms and assault them. And I said, men go into women's bathrooms now and assault them. How's this going to make it any different? She didn't know what to say to that and scurried away. So the bathrooms and the trans issue is the second argument that they use. It used to be same-sex marriage, but they lost that one, so they don't have that argument anymore. And then the third one is we don't need it. You know, women are already equal. We already have all the rights. We already have equal pay. We already have everything. We don't need it. And the last one, now this is if someone can explain this to me, please do. It will destroy the family. They bring this out every time for the last 40 years. It'll destroy the family. Well, if what you're talking about is it will destroy the patriarchal family, that means that only men have any rights. And as the Republican woman said at the convention, only men should be able to vote, and they should vote for the woman. If that's the kind of family they mean will be destroyed, then I say, yes, let's destroy that family. But of course, it doesn't mean that for families of equality.
Right. Kathy and then Felicia.
A funny backstory, when the ERA was introduced to the Arizona State Legislature back in the day, it was introduced by then Republican legislator Sandra Day O'Connor.
Yep. And the second time it was introduced, it was by Claire Dunn, a nun, a Republican nun.
Wow.
So it wasn't about abortion, was it?
The other argument I hear frequently in our district is that women will be drafted. And as a 30 military veteran, I laugh at that because, first of all, I believe the draft was ended in 1975 for males and for everybody, and that women would be in combat. Well, I hate to tell them that, but I was in a war zone. We were in combat before this. It was a joke that they weren't allowed in combat. Now the combat exclusion clause for women is no longer there. Women are legally allowed to be in combat. Now, even though they were before, they just didn't get credit for it or counted for it, whatever you want to call it. Right. But that's often been the argument. And I remind them that the draft, it's been a long time since we've had a draft, and also women already in war zones.
Already in. And I'm sure you know, Felicia, that the National Commission on the Draft issued their report in March. And if there ever is a draft again, women will be drafted with or without the ERA. I mean, that's already going to happen. And there was a case in Texas in which the Texas judge said, you can't draft men and not draft women. We draft them on the same provisions. You know, are they fit? Can they do the job? Etc. They're going to, if we have a draft again, women will be drafted, and we won't have the ERA. That's the problem. We have all the responsibilities, but we don't have the rights.
Thanks, Diane. Sharon, did you want to add something?
Well, to all of you out there who live in other countries, you must be laughing because there's many countries out there that already draft women. There are many countries out there that have unisex bathrooms. And we even have unisex bathrooms now in the US. How many people have stopped at a gas station and there's one bathroom, right? So all these problems are just hilarious. I think they're funny. And I just wanted to bring that up, that there really isn't any reason. And I know when I was in England and there's other countries, abortion was considered part of the continuum of women's health care. It was not politicized like it is here. Women come into me and said, I want to terminate a pregnancy. I called up the local hospital or wrote something down and they went, so it wasn't a big deal. And we like to do that kind of stuff in the US, and I have to apologize because it really doesn't make sense.
No,
But
most
what
of the
is also-
Constitution, oh, Diane, go ahead.
What is also so ironic is these people that don't wear a mask, they're out there with saying, my body, my choice. So they believe it's their choice to not wear a mask and harm someone else, but they don't think it's women's choice to choose their own reproductive care and harm no one else. But it's just ironic. Suddenly they've all become pro-choice only for themselves.
So Diane understands this fight over the decades in Arizona very well, but the last couple of years in particular, all the efforts that have been made to counter these arguments, now we're going to do it a different way. We're just going to elect a Democratic legislature and let them take care of it. The arguments are out there, they all make sense, and now let's just vote blue and ratify the ERA in January of 2021. I think that we're ready, Angela, to go to some questions from Facebook and from the chat. Is that right?
Yes, we do have a few questions.
It's all yours.
All right, so we have a question about the ERA. What have you done and what will you do to make sure Arizona is the 39th state to ratify the ERA?
Well, we'll turn Arizona blue and then it'll be the 39th state. I mean, we've tried to work with the Republicans. We've tried to convince them. We can't get anywhere with them. It's a national thing. They absolutely won't get off the position. And so we have to do it blue. And so all of our resources, all of our work, everything is directed toward this election.
Okay. This question could be answered by any of the candidates. In fact, you could all answer it. In 2018, Arizona not only elected its first Democratic senator, but also its first LGBT senator. Now this year, Martha McSally, who is on the Senate despite losing the race, is behind the polls. Do you think Arizona will make history by having 2 Democratic senators?
I'll start on that one if you'd like. Yes, I think that we will. And the reason I appreciate the chance to begin on this is my district, Legislative District 20, has historically been a very red district, but its population changes and the work of a lot of activist groups in registering voters has really started to shift that. So that's why this district has been targeted nationwide as one of the key districts to flip. In 2016, our district went for Trump. Trump won this district, but by a smaller margin than other Republican presidential candidates had in the past. But in 2018, this district went for Kirsten Sinema. So this time in this election, Mark Kelly's campaign sees this as really pivotal. So we already have 2 paid organizers right in District 20 who are working with Mark Kelly. And my teammate, Doug Urban, who's running for the state Senate together with me, and I often tell volunteers and people we're speaking to, you know, your efforts in this district will not only help us win, but it will help Mark Kelly win, and it will help Joe Biden win, because this is going to be a trickle up election. When we get people out to vote for local candidates, that's going to help Mark Kelly and Joe Biden as well.
May I say something?
Go ahead.
I think absolutely everything that Judy said is right. And we candidates here that have tough districts, but winnable districts. We're in very highly targeted races. We have the great opportunity to watch how Kirsten Sinema did it and watch how Mark Kelly is doing it. They're running very inclusive campaigns about being welcoming to everybody, representing everybody, working across the aisle. And I think not only does that speak to the changing demographics here in Arizona, but it speaks to a larger theme that people are really very tired of the partisan bickering and the inability of our leaders to work together to solve the problems. I would say, especially during this pandemic, we do not have the time to be really focusing on the partisan divide. We need candidates, we need legislators who are going to unify Arizona, who are going to work to unify the United States. We need grown-ups in the room. This pandemic has put such a burden on families and students and businesses. We really need to all be rowing in the same direction. And I say Kirsten and Mark are running really inclusive campaigns. And I know from watching my colleagues here, we're trying to do the same thing for our local communities. And I think if we can bring that philosophy and that mindset and the work ethic to the Arizona State Legislature, we're going to see things, important things getting done like we've never seen before.
Well said, Kathy. She's exactly right.
Yeah, I agree with both, of course, Judy and Kathy on this. I've actually had the pleasure of canvassing a little bit with Mark Kelly, and I think he's a wonderful man. He's very progressive. I love his wife, Gabby Gifford here from Arizona. She's awesome, and they're a great power couple. And I think it's going to be reverse coattails. And like Kathy said, people are sick and tired of the fighting. The 32 years I spent in the military, the thousands of people, not only military, but civilians, the Department of Defense civilians and contractors I met, not once did we ever ask what party they belong to. We just cared about taking care of each other and getting the mission accomplished. And I really, really feel more and more people this year, people want that. But no matter what party they belong to, they're just sick of the bickering. And so they want to see, instead of pointing fingers, getting things done and coming up with solutions. And that's what, the Democrats here are, all of us feel the same way. So I see this as a positive thing.
Yes, let's hope that
Can I just say
Mark
something
wins.
too?
Go ahead.
Yeah. The other thing that people are looking for are science-minded candidates. And of course, Mark being an astronaut, myself, I think Felicia, we're endorsed by a group called 314 Action that endorses STEM candidates. And the thing is, we need more people representing us that believe in science. One of my opponents is a climate change denier. And also, neither one of them wear masks out in public, shaking hands, doing the whole thing. We need to elect people up and down the ballot who believe that science is real and will fight for science-driven legislation and things for the good of everybody. And I think that Mark resonates in that. And McSally hasn't been holding up her end of the bargain, so.
I have a question. Okay, living outside the United States, we see what's going on in America and the lack of science education. Did you have any idea before this pandemic that so many people were ignorant of scientific facts? I mean,
I did. Well, when I practiced medicine, I was very surprised. So I kind of knew women don't understand how their bodies work. I can go into anatomy, but I won't. But men too. And people argue with you like they know and you don't. And it's like, well, I have a medical degree. So I had a kind of an inkling. Of course, this has exploded and it's worse than we ever thought. But when I'm on Facebook and I'm discussing things about statistics or science data, people are actually arguing with me. And one of the things I want to say to them is, do you not respect my medical degree? Because I know you are the same person who, when you get in a car accident and show up in the emergency room, you look at me and say, please save my life. And I work to save your life. And that's happened to me before many times because I worked in the emergency room. But yet you want to argue with me about medical facts and data. So you can't have it both ways. Either you trust us because we know what we're talking about, or you know better with whatever background you have. So this has just come out where there's been an explosion of people just thinking they know everything. And I've never seen it this bad. I had an inkling, like I said, when the internet started. I started practicing in the 80s before the internet. And there was a lot of respect for medical providers. Once the internet started, they'd get on their phones and they'd say, no, I read this and I want this drug. Or I know that you're gonna, like, don't tell me how to practice and don't tell me what I'm doing. And it was, you get into these confrontations. So it's gotten a lot worse. And I honestly don't know how we get out of it, but yeah, you go on, Felicia.
No, I was going to say, I didn't really know this, but I don't think, first of all, I think it really underscores how poor our public education system is. Obviously, we've already mentioned that in Arizona, but if you look at it nationwide, we're defunding public education. They're trying to keep it down for whatever reason. I won't get into that because but nationwide, our public education system in the United States pales in comparison to other countries, as you all know that are in the other countries. I remember in Germany in the 80s, in Japan, all that. They have more year-round schooling. They have trade schools. You have choices for our kids to go not just to universities, but trade schools, community colleges. All-day kindergarten is funded in those countries. So it really speaks to our education system right now and our leadership. Our leadership, if they condone saying that science is a hoax, then of course it goes down. It trickles down. Stupidity definitely trickles down. Money doesn't, but stupidity does. So, those are the two things we need to make sure we have really good leadership that respects science and start funding our public education system across this country.
Right, and we know that this science denying mentality is affecting our health, and it's also affecting our environment. For our friends on the other side of the globe, maybe you've seen that Arizona had 50 days over 110 degrees already this year. We know that our climate change is affecting so many different things, and there are things that Arizona legislature can do to help mitigate this heat index here, and they do nothing for that. And the long-term effects on our economy and the quality of our lives and our health is going to be devastating unless we start doing what we can. And that starts with having the conversations. And to date, those conversations haven't even been allowed to happen in the Arizona State Legislature. So that's really what I'm looking forward to, is letting the important conversations be had, letting those debates go on, and letting some good ideas come forward so we can solve some of these problems.
Right, and it goes back to science has been so politicized, and that just points back to exactly what all the other candidates have just been saying today, that we need leaders who will depoliticize it, who will say, let's come together, let's look at this, let's work together on this. So all of us are among those leaders, and of course we need to make sure we're electing a new leader of our nation as well, who will support science and support education and not try to defund it and privatize it.
Yes, yes, definitely. We need better education in the United States. That's the one thing that I've learned from this pandemic, for sure, that we need better education, because people seem to not know very much at all. And ignorance doesn't trickle down, it just flows down like a river. Yes.
Angela, can I ask one last quick question, and just everyone can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Sure, go ahead.
There is so much excitement about local and state issues in Arizona. We've talked about some of them on this call. We are urging people to vote down ballot so that good decisions can be made. But can you tell me, in Arizona, are there going to be people coming out to support you and other state elected officials And that will help us to vote up ballot. Or because you're running and because there are so many other great candidates in Arizona and we need to win at the state level, is that going to help Biden, Harris, and Kelly win as well? Yes,
Yeah.
no, yes.
We had record primary turnout on Democrats in the primary this year in Arizona.
And we all were the top vote getters in the primary. So
Okay, well, Felicia, Sharon, Kathy, Judy, and Diane, thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking all this time to talk to us and dig into our questions, and of course, remind us of the importance of voting down ballot. Okay.
Yes, thank
Okay,
you so much for having us, and vote, vote, vote.
Oh, yeah.
vote.
Yeah.
All right, 3 words as I close: vote, volunteer, and donate.
And
All right,
you know,
thank
we do need to say for our voters overseas, please, everyone who's voting overseas, go to votefromabroad.org to get your ballot and do it now and vote down ballot. Arizona voters in Arizona, vote early, vote by